Hey, self? Yeah, self? Why the sunglasses? Because I feel like a rock star. Um, why? Because I got a request. Thank you for Arbutero1 for suggesting this video. Yeah, I know, it was 2 months ago, but time flies when you're having fun. Today we're talking about how my alma mater, dude, the school you graduated from. Yeah, that's what I said. Today we're talking about how my alma mater's rival, Jesuit High School, was made possible by the Reformation. Hey everybody, I'm Jeremy Corwin. Now today if you drive around your neighborhood, you'll likely see a lot of different Christian churches. Baptist, Methodist, Lutheran, Catholic, etc. If you were living in Europe before 1517, this would not have been the case. In Western Europe, you had one church. That's a church we know today as the Roman Catholic Church. In 1517, that all changed as a result of the Protestant Reformation. So check this out. We've got a timeline here. And you remember we talked about the Great Schism. I didn't call it the Great Schism because honestly I forgot to tell you that. But it was a Great Schism where the Western and Eastern churches split, and you had the Roman Catholic Church on one side and the Greek Orthodox Church on the other. So you got these two churches, and then in 1517 there's this split again, and you've got what are called Protestant churches. And here you've got some examples of that. You've got Lutheran, Calvinist, Anabaptist, and Anglican. But how did all these get started? Well, let's go back to the beginning and let's look at the word Protestant Reformation. The word Protestant comes from the word protest, and the word Reformation comes from the name reform. And that's exactly what happened here. You had some people who were protesting against the church and people who wanted to reform or change the church. So what were their complaints? Well, there were a couple of them. One, people complained that priests and bishops weren't religious anymore. They also complained that the Pope was too involved in politics and not paying enough attention to religion. They complained that their church had become too rich. If you take a look at St. Peter's Basilica, the church that was built in Vatican City, you can see how much money the church had. I mean, that church cost a lot of money to build. And one of the ways they built these churches, is really the fourth complaint, was they were selling indulgences. Indulgences. What's an indulgence? Well, let's take a look. Here's how this works. You've got a church member here. He has sinned, and he says to the Pope, hey, I've sinned, but I don't want to stay in purgatory for a long time. By the way, purgatory is kind of like a holding place. You know, you have heaven on one side, hell on the other side. And purgatory is kind of in the middle, where if you were going to go to heaven, you stayed in purgatory until you've met your requirements, and then you get into heaven. So the church member says, I don't want to spend a long time in purgatory. And the Pope says, hey, great. I've got, I can get you into heaven faster if you buy this indulgence. Kind of a contract that gets you out of purgatory faster. The churchgoer says, cool. The church member sends the Pope money, and he gets his indulgence. And the sale of indulgences did not go over well with everyone. So people had problems with these indulgences. Now, question the church may be a result of the Renaissance, where people start to value critical thinking and questioning their surroundings. And so along comes this guy, Martin Luther. Nope, that's Martin Luther King Jr. He's a different guy. Yep, that guy right there. So along comes Martin Luther. He's a priest. He sees some problems with indulgences, and he's got some ideas about where the church has kind of gone wrong. In fact, he has 95 of these ideas, and he nails them to the door of a church in Saxony, Germany. These ideas were widely dispersed thanks to a new invention called the printing press. Think about this. Before the printing press, if you wanted to pass pamphlets out, you had to handwrite every single one. So yeah, it just really wasn't done very often. And then you've got the printing press, where you can now mass produce ideas and send them out to people. And that's what happens here. Ultimately, Pope Leo X would excommunicate. Dude, kick out of the church. Yeah, that's what I said. Pope Leo X excommunicated Martin Luther, and the Holy Roman Emperor exiled. Man, that's just a fancy word for kicking him out of the country. Yeah, that's what I said. The Holy Roman Emperor exiled Martin Luther from Germany. Martin Luther had never planned on breaking apart from the church. In fact, he just wanted to reform the church, or fix what he saw as problems in the church. He never wanted to leave the church. But after being kicked out of the church, he went on to preach more. He thought it was important that the Bible be translated into the languages people spoke. He thought people should have access to the Bible, not just the clergy. He also taught that anybody could have a direct relationship with God. You didn't have to go through a priest first, which was pretty controversial for the Roman Catholic Church. Luther's followers would found the Lutheran Church of Germany, which was a Protestant church. Remember, Protestant comes back to the word protest. But this Protestant movement wasn't only happening in Germany. Take a look at Switzerland. In Switzerland, you had a guy by the name of John Calvin. John Calvin believed that God had already decided whether people would go to heaven or go to hell. So it didn't matter what you did. He still preached that you had to do good, but that had already been determined, and it wasn't up to the clergy in Rome. He also didn't believe that trying to make money was evil, so he became very, very popular with the merchants in Geneva. And so his followers would be called Calvinists. Let's take a look at Henry VIII, that guy right there. He wanted a divorce from his wife, Catherine, because they had not had a male son to take his place. When he asked the Pope for this divorce, the Pope said no. So how did Henry VIII respond? By making himself the head of the Anglican Church. Church of England. That's what I said, Anglican Church. This was probably for the best since Henry VIII had 6 divorces total. You can imagine the Catholic Church did not like losing followers or the land that those followers were on. And so they did a lot to try to hold things together. Let's start in Spain. So Spain had recently won a war against the Muslims and were in the process of forcing all the Muslims and Jews in their country to convert to Christianity. And by Christianity, I mean the Catholic Church. They had started a series of investigations to find people who were practicing their old religions in private. These investigations are known as the Inquisition. And the Inquisition has a reputation for being extremely brutal. So they expanded the Inquisition to also try to find Protestants. And as you can imagine, there's not a lot of opposition to the Catholic Church in Spain after this. In other parts of the world, religious orders were created to help support the church. Religious orders were started that tried to stop Protestants. One of these was called the Society of Jesus. It was created to serve the Pope and the church. The Society of Jesus is also known as the Jesuits. 500 years later, the Society of Jesus would start Jesuit High School in Portland, Oregon, which would serve as formidable rivals to my alma mater. Westview's the best view! Anyway, the Council of Trent was a meeting of religious leaders to look at how they could reform the church from within. However, they basically said that the Protestants were wrong on almost all counts, but they would try to be less corrupt in the future. Then there were missionaries. Missionaries worked hard around the world to spread the religion to distant lands. They went to Asia, they went to Africa, they went across Europe, and they went to the Americas as well. So what? So what about this Protestant Reformation? The Protestant Reformation led to a very violent period in European history. Wars were fought between Protestants and Catholics. One of these wars, the 30 Years' War, would devastate France. But it would lead eventually to relative religious freedom in France. In Protestant churches, it changed the way people thought about power. In Protestant churches, members elected their leaders and made rules for their congregation, and not a pope. This idea of self-government would have a huge impact on the British colonists living in America. Spoiler alert, there was a big war that made America America. Were you paying attention? Answer the next couple of questions to find out. What was the Protestant Reformation? How did the Catholic Church respond to the Protestant Reformation? And what was the effect the Protestant Reformation had on Europe? Hey, sorry about the audio in this video. For some reason, the microphone didn't pick up and the computer microphone did instead. So I apologize for the audio. Did you know there's over 33,000 different Protestant churches in the world today? Why are there so many different churches? Let me give you an example of one of the things they differ in. One of these ideas has to do with communion. Communion has to do with drinking wine and eating bread, the wine becoming the blood of Jesus and the bread becoming the flesh of Jesus. And it has to do with the Last Supper. And one of the difference in these churches has to do with how does the blood of Christ and the flesh of Christ come into this wine and bread. The Catholic Church says that transubstantiation, the process of changing the wine and bread into blood and flesh, has to have a priest to do that. And Martin Luther said that transubstantiation did in fact happen, but you didn't need a priest for that. Another Protestant reformer at the same time as Luther, Ulrich Zwingli, said that the blood and the flesh of Christ wasn't actually in the wine and bread. It was just a symbolic act that church members did. So that's just one example of how churches can split on these really important religious disputes. Thank you again for the request. If there's anything you'd like to see a video on in the future, go ahead and leave it in comments below, and I'll try to make that happen for you.